Okay, so the next step is UV unwrapping. So if I go up here, I can go to UV editing mode, and it puts my window on the right and my UV, my editor, on the left. So just get this about right. Just there we go. Seem to have got it. All right. Okay. So looking something like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the various options for unwrapping this. So to unwrap it, we normally unwrap it onto something. So I'm going to, down here, create a new image, test grid, UV test grid. Okay, that, and there is a test grid. So it gives me pluses, minuses in different colours, and the idea of this is that I can actually see whether any of the areas are being stretched, and we can see what's going on when we unwrap it. So you can play around with this. I can get a nice colour grid, which I find helps me to visualise things a lot better because it gives me colours and numbers, so I can see what's mapped to what. So now we'll look at the various mapping options on here. So if I go and instead of doing shaded, do textured, and I select all the vertices on there. I'm just going to make that solid so we can see it, and hit U. There's a number of options I've got. I've got a plain unwrap, which is the first one that most people start with. So if I do that, what's happened is it's unwrapped it. Now we can see that it doesn't really look anything like a bowl, and if we go over here and go back into texture mode, it seems to have turned it off, we can see that it has unwrapped it. It's quite difficult to see the letters. It seems to have unwrapped it onto the original grid, to be honest. But if we scale this, so if we select all of these and do scale, we can see that this is moving. Okay, so we can see what's happening in that, on that test grid, and you can see because it's tiled, we'll just get it tiled up a bit. It's not very easy to see how changing this would affect what's going on here. You see this piece here looks very strange. So let's try and wrapping it in a different way and see whether it makes any more sense. So if we do a smart UV project, that takes into account the way that the item is actually being constructed. So if I do a smart UV, you can play around with these. You can now see something that maybe looks a lot more like the bowl that we created. So we've got one piece here and we've got two other pieces here. It's difficult to see because these pieces appear to be overlaid. So if we select one point and hit L, all of these elements are linked. So, but all of these vertices are linked together. I would suspect that this is the outer edge of the bowl, this is the inner edge of the bowl, this is the inside of the bowl. You can see C2, C3, C4. So we've got the outer edge and the inner edge of the bowl. There is our D4, which is up here mapped onto this edge. And then the outside of the bowl up here, the outside of the bowl is actually mapped to the underneath of the bowl. And you can just see around there, we can see the E numbers, E6, E7. If we look, so that's mapped to this area here. And if we select those, hit L and hit G to move them around, you'll see that I can actually move them around the image. Okay, so that's smart UV wrapping. We're getting something that looks much more as we would expect, and you'll notice that there's not a lot of stretching. The actual letters and numbers are at about the right scale. They all look okay. So this image has not been stretched to fit, or these vertices have not been stretched or deformed in any way to fit onto this image. So we should get quite a nice mapping with this. So what about the other options? So if we select everything and we do U, and do follow active quads, what's going to happen is I'm going to get something that looks like this, which is going to give us something slightly different. So if we grab that and move it around, you can see that it's actually quite difficult to work out what's going on with following active quads. If we have a look under here, we can probably see lots of stretching going on there, look, with these. So that's probably not a good method for us to unwrap with the active quads, although these don't seem to have been stretched too much. Any other methods? Well, we've also got projection. So if we were using something which is basically a cube projection would work very well. It doesn't work very well in this case, as you can see, because this isn't a cube at all. This is in fact more circular. So we might be better with something like a sphere projection or a cylinder projection. It's not looking too good for either of those either. Okay, but you can see that what happens is when we unwrap something, what can happen is the image can get stretched, and the idea of this is to reduce the stretching of the image so that we get something that looks like the original image mapped onto our surfaces. The final one that I'm going to do is project from view. So project from view is quite useful if we're looking to map just part of the image. So I've chosen a top ortho, and if I know that this image needs to be draped over the top of these vertices, and I do project from view, I actually get something that maps pretty much entirely to the way that I've seen it. And notice there's no stretching or anything there. If I look underneath, it hasn't actually mapped those vertices underneath. So if I go select one of these vertices, so if I control select, sorry, alt select those vertices, you'll see those vertices haven't been mapped because they weren't part of the set of vertices that were seen when I unwrapped it from the view. So when we do unwrap from view, it only does the ones that were seen. 9 times out of 10, your best starting point is a smart UV project, if you select everything. Okay. And once we've done that, what we want to do is we want to minimize the stretching and minimize the amount of texture space that we're using. So the basic keys are, I can right click to select, hit L to select everything on an island, and hit G to move it around. If I do the same with this and hit L, I've selected everything on that island. I can move it around, as we can see here, and I can also scale it. So as it scales smaller, clearly the proportion of the image that it takes is less. And scale up again, and you'll notice that because this is a tileable, essentially a tileable image, as I scale up, it's going to take more and more tiles of that image. Okay, and I can also scale it in the X, and I can scale it in the Y as well. So I can scale things around like that, and I can grab and move individual vertices. We can't actually see the effect of that, but we can just in the between E3 and E4, we can just see that vertex being moved. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to lay this out on the image so that we get no stretching. So that's the first part of our UV mapping exercise.